welcome, everybody. Thank you. I'm Doug Marker, president of the City Club, and today's program is Oregonians at War, Returnees from Iraq. And our guests today are Staff Sergeant Rebekah-mae Neoma Bruns, Sergeant First Class Vince Jacques, and Oregonian journalist Helen Jung. And our panel today will be moderated by our Executive Director, Wendy Radmacher-Willis. I have a few announcements on club business to go through, and first I'd ask if you would remember to turn down your cell phones and pagers. There will be no Friday Forum next week. It's the 4th of July holiday, so our next Friday Forum will be July 8th. We'll have Portland on Tap, How Microbrews Became Big Business, with Carl Oakert, brewmaster of Bridgeport Brewery, and Jim Parker, former executive director of the Oregon Brewers Guild, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce the name of his current magazine. They'll tell us about how the craft breweries got started in Oregon, and Bridgeport has agreed to provide samples. Later that day, the new Leaders Council will host a brewery tour at Bridgeport led by Carl Oakert. That tour will be free, but you need to sign up in advance. Full details on this are in the bulletin or online. Tonight is our final Friday after work get-together at City Club Commons over here at 9th and Southwest Washington. It's free, it's open to the public, no reservations. It's a good opportunity to come meet the club staff, some of the club board members, get to know a little bit more about the club, and I hope you'll stop by after work. On Monday night at 7:15, again at City Club Commons, the Citizens Read Book Club will get together to discuss Philip Roth's The Plot Against America, and that'll be moderated by Rabbi David Kaminsky. We have a couple of research study opportunities, and I'd particularly encourage our new members to participate in our research work. We have two studies beginning this summer, a new look at the initiative and referendum in Oregon, and that'll be a 6-month study to update the club's existing report, and an analysis of partisanship in the Oregon political system, which would be a regular long-term 12-month study. For details about these opportunities, contact Wade Fickler, our research director. I want to remind you about our citizen salons. There's still room at some of the tables. Others are selling out quickly. They've been fun, and we've had great reports about them. There's a brochure at the registration table, and again, you can get details at the club's website. The club's website, again, is pdxcityclub.org, and while you're there, you can also find information on membership, our TV and radio schedule, and our Citizens Blog online forum. You can also listen to today's forum online, and we have audio CDs and videotapes available for purchase. Our sponsors this quarter are Kaiser Permanente and Nike Incorporated. Would you join me in thanking our sponsors? They help make the club's broadcast possible. A couple of statistics to start our program today. The number of Oregon Guardsmen activated since September 11th is 8,000. Number of Guardsmen deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan since September 11th is 2,100. There are 650 Oregon Guardsmen still in Iraq as of May 10th, and 11 have been killed. There are neighbors, our family members, our coworkers, and our friends. And while national discussion is asking about the goals and the exit strategy for the war in Iraq, the deployment of the National Guard is raising new questions about the role of the Guard and the reserves in our nation's defense. Our speakers have returned from assignments in Iraq and are at City Club today to share their perspectives in a question and answer format. And Wendy Radmacher-Willis will moderate the first portion of the program, and then we'll open to questions from the floor. To introduce our speakers, Helen Jung has been a reporter with the Oregonian since February 2004, and she covers Nike, Adidas, Columbia Sportswear, and the business side of the Portland Trail Blazers, which must be kind of a relief. For 2 months in 2004, she went on special assignment for the Oregonian as an embedded reporter with the Oregon National Guard in Baghdad and Taji, Iraq. Staff Sergeant Rebekah-mae Bruns spent a year in Iraq as a military photographer and journalist, and she was the only female in her unit. Before that, she was a photographer for the Cottage Grove Sentinel News. Thanks. Sergeant First Class Vince Jacques was severely wounded in an ambush in Iraq in July of last year. He's currently working for the Guard's reintegration program, assisting other soldiers returning to civilian life. And our moderator, of course, is our friend Wendy Radmacher-Willis, our executive director. Before joining the City Club, Wendy was a clerk for Oregon Supreme Court Chief Justice Wallace P. Carson Jr. and was an assistant federal public defender. Wendy is passionate about books, as we know, running, and civic engagement, and she lives in southeast Portland with her husband Jonathan and 2 young daughters, Ruby and Violet. So Wendy, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you, Doug. Welcome to all of you. We're really glad to have you with us today. I think with few exceptions, all of us in the room have learned everything that we know about what's happening in Iraq through the media. So we're really grateful to have a sort of unfiltered opportunity to speak with you and hear your perspectives and talk to some of our fellow Oregonians about our experience there. The program committee and I have designed a few questions for all of you, and then I'll ask each one of you an individualized question near the end of the panel, and then we'll open the floor up for questions from City Club members. In the last couple of weeks in particular, a lot of the news that we've heard about Iraq is bad news through the media. Continued insurgency, American casualties, seems like every week. Is there, in your experience, is there any good news from Iraq, and what is it? And we'd like to hear from all of you on that. Helen?
I'd say, sure, there is good news. It is, but it comes with an asterisk. You have big stories like the election, which was a total success in terms of turnout, the lack of violence, and I think that was pretty thoroughly reported and presented as such. On a just kind of a smaller level, you have a lot of small successes with schools reopening, or just some of just fields of sewage being drained so that kids can play in them again. But when you're talking about I think the thing that struck me the most when I went there was how broken everything is. And so you can point to these successes, but you still have a much bigger problem and an incredibly large problem. And then overriding all of this is that if you're not secure, if you don't feel safe going down the street, then things like a school that's open becomes less important in your daily life because you're more worried about, okay, well, walking there, is something going to happen on the way there? I think it's something like 400 some car bombings in the past year alone. It's, when you have casualties on that level, that is going to dominate the news, and that's perhaps why you aren't seeing as much focus on some of the smaller successes.
First of all, thanks for having us here. The first thing I want to get straight is I really like to stay out of the political stuff, but I'll shoot you the straight answer. It might not always agree with what the Army has to say. But as for the question, when I was there, I was sent back on the 28th of July, so to that time, I saw some really amazing things happen. Schools that had never been opened, or never been there really, they were built. I didn't see it on the news. And it really, coming from the soldiers, that not being reported, it was rather painful. Water treatment plants, going to these communities and finding out what they needed. We were doing everything we could for these people. The vote, after I was sent home, my brother's in the same unit as me, and he pretty much got to see something that's historical. He got to see those elections. And to me, something good is when somebody's willing to risk their life to go and vote. We don't have that here. You can't see that here. But these guys got to see that. And they're waiting in line that were just wrapped around places. They could have been hit by anybody, in a suicide bomber wrapped up in a vest with explosives in it. But they went and did that. I think that's something good. And I really don't think it was expounded on enough. And most of all, what is happening there, no matter what anyone says, these people are being liberated. It was a horrible thing. These people have been beat down, and they just seeing that they don't even have a grasp of what they have yet. So there's some things I can expound on that, but I want to let Sergeant Bruns talk too.
I'll echo what Sergeant Jacques said. Thanks for having us here today. And there's a whole host of really wonderful things that have happened that never makes the news. And that's just crazy disappointing for soldiers when they feel like they're working so hard and there's so little return from the media or from the public. One of the things that was really amazing, I spoke with Iraqi women who the first time ever were being given the same opportunities. Women historically have never been in their army or their National Guard. They are now. Historically, they've never been able to get a job as a police officer. They are now, and they're turning out in record numbers. It's amazing. Also, before, when Saddam was in power, Shiites were not allowed to be police officers or hold any kind of government position. When I spoke with the Iraqi police on multiple occasions, the new forces that they're turning out are completely integrated. They have Sunni, they have Shia, they have Kurdish, all working together. And the same with the ING. In Baghdad, we had a platoon of Iraqi National Guard that lived with us, and they were mixed. They were Sunni, Shia, Kurdish, and they got along great. It was really amazing to see them working like that. In the past, that never would have been like that. There's just so much stuff, and I'm having a brain freeze. But I want to echo too, election days was amazing. If you could have seen the looks on these people's faces. One woman said to me something like, I've waited 60 years to be able to go and do this, to have a voice. And in that moment, it was really hard for me to keep from having tears well up in my eyes, because I couldn't possibly imagine that in my lifetime. I know there's lots more I'm leaving out because I'm so nervous, so I'll come back around to more later.
Thank you to all of you. Because Oregon has so many National Guard troops deployed, we've heard a lot about equipment and whether our Guard troops have appropriate equipment. And I'd like you to comment a little bit, if you can, about whether you saw a difference in equipment that was provided to Guard troops versus active duty troops. And outside of that, generally, whether you just felt like the equipment that you were supplied was adequate to keep you safe and allow you to do your job. And Helen, I'd also like to just hear from you what you perceive there.
Actually, by the time I got there, it was the battalion I was embedded with had been there for about 5 months or so. And so actually, by the time I got there, it was September of 2004, it seemed that a lot of the problems had been resolved. I know that in talking with people there at the time, and since then, it wasn't that way necessarily before. But when I was there, generally, at least at patrol base volunteer, Humvees were not going outside the wire unless they were either up-armored or fully armored. And I know that in terms of with the Humvee issue, one of the reasons why I think I probably didn't see as many problems was the maintenance people in the battalion were actually known throughout the brigade for, actually maybe even throughout the division for their just the great work that they did in keeping them operational.
I can go into a lot of stuff on this. The Oregon Guard has been a enhanced infantry brigade, which means we get a lot of money coming down. When we got to Fort Hood, Texas, we were walking around with our weapon systems, M4 carbines, and the soldiers at Fort Hood still had M16A2s. The list kind of goes on from there. We did have outstanding equipment in that sense. One thing I always do whenever I have a chance is I expand on the Humvee issue. I don't think it gets out enough about the up-armored and the factory-armored 114s. There's a huge difference. These guys need those 114s bad. And I can tell you I would not be sitting here if I was not in that Humvee. I was hit with 4 to 8 155 rounds. That's 400 to 800 pounds of explosives that went off underneath my vehicle. 3 of us lived, and it killed my driver. And if it was not for that Humvee, we would have all been dead. My body armor, the body armor is, I'm putting the numbers at, personally, my view from what I saw over there, They've probably, the individual IBA, the interceptor body armor, has probably saved 10,000 plus lives. And that's a lot of people for right around 150,000 serving in a theater, when other wars there was a lot more. So the other things they issue, there would be a lot of eye issues. We have ballistic glasses that'll stop a .22 long rifle at 100 meters, if I'm not mistaken. That's Wiley X's, and we were required to wear those. As for us receiving those items, it was very difficult at first. We weren't, the Army, you never really can be prepared for exactly what you're going to fight, because that's the whole key in war. Somebody's trying to switch the deal on you. But the Humvees, we did what we had to do in Udari, and we were driving the cardboard coffins up into Baghdad, and that was really scary. After a while, we started getting the armored Humvees more, but that's a whole nother issue. I truly do believe that the American public has not seen this war on the home front, and for us to be able to have what we need over there, they're going to have to, somebody might not be able to drive their Suburban, but in that case, some soldier will drive a 114 over there, and then he'll come home and have a family. And unless we sacrifice back here, I really don't see that happening. But the guys are getting it as much as they can. They're making these big pushes with these armored Humvees coming over there, and you see those numbers. But what I haven't seen is how many we're losing each month to maintenance and attacks. So I really would like to see more of those go over there.
Sergeant Jacques is right about the body armor. It's absolutely amazing. It saves so many lives. And it's also another reason why we see more amputees now, but that's because the body armor saved their lives, whereas in Vietnam or someplace like that, they would have died. When originally our unit was slotted to get absolutely everything the same that the 1st Cav Division got, but there was a small lag time. The equipment was supposed to be in Kuwait when we got in Kuwait. They had some problems making sure that it all got there. So we didn't get all the up-armored Humvees in the beginning, and it took a while. So the guys really did have to do what all of us, we all had to do what we could to make them as safe as possible on the drive up to Baghdad. And that meant finding whatever kind of scrap metal you could find, welding it, taking whatever skill you had from back home on the farm or wherever, and putting it to use. And that meant using wood. People found wood and literally built wood panels on the side of these Humvees had the back that was open, and then placed sandbags inside the panels of wood to act as protection. Also, we used old flak jackets and placed them on the side of the doors and on the bottom of the Humvees and vehicles to act as protection if we got hit with an IED. So we drove up to Baghdad, and into Baghdad, of course, the inevitable happened, and we got hit. And I myself was in an open 510. There was nothing. Top was completely open. But, there's a saying, if you're going through hell, keep on going. So you just do what you got to do and keep on going. Eventually, the equipment caught up with us, and we got all the armored 114s. We got all the necessary equipment that we needed, and there was no difference. There was just a lag time in the beginning, which created some problems. But eventually, we did get it.
Great, thank you. All of you have mentioned the election in Iraq, and so the question we have for you today is, from what you observed, is Iraq ready for democracy? And what can we do to build the institutions necessary to have a democracy flourish in Iraq?
It's tough to answer that, and for one reason, I was only there for 2 months and just getting this tiny view of what was going on. I think that in talking with the the random times I was able to talk with Iraqis either through an interpreter or because they spoke English, there was a lot of enthusiasm for just what was going on. They were excited at the prospect of controlling their own destiny. I think in practice it is a little bit more challenging. You have a lot of situations where there was a number of soldiers were frustrated because they felt that Iraqis weren't doing enough for themselves to kind of rebuild their country. And I was talking with an Iraqi about this who is on one of the district councils, sort of like a city council, but on a smaller scale. And his response was, it's going to take a long time for us to figure out how to do this on our own because for decades we have never had that power. And so, to expect us in a year or whatever to, all of a sudden take control and do things for ourselves and have these perfect systems in place is unrealistic. Although he was saying that, eventually they will get there. But I think there are going to be, things that need to be worked out. Just, again, talking to some of the civil affairs people and in their interactions with Iraqis in governmental positions or just mostly governmental positions, just they would relate tales of kickbacks, of people not showing up to work, of people, garbage truck or garbage collectors demanding payments from individual households to pick up their garbage when they're already being paid by the government to do that. And I remember the battalion commander had said that, acknowledging that there are these problems that, hopefully at some point, people will see that they can make a living without asking for these bribes and these kickbacks. But I think it's going to be a long process.
That question's a little bit out of my lane as a platoon sergeant, but what I do see is I think once it is established there, first of all, before you do anything, you need security. You need to kind of have the grounds there for promoting that. There will be a democracy there, but it's not going to really be like ours. It will involve religion, I believe, and this is my personal view. And there's a lot of tribal issues there too. There's tribes that have been fighting there since the start of time, and it's a cradle of civilization there. So there's a lot of issues like that that'll have to be dealt with. One of the things I was going to say earlier is I wanted to expound on what they do have now in the military is have an RFI before you go over there, and this has to deal with equipment. Rapid Fielding Initiative. There's a lot of stuff that's not really prototype, but it's like our boots. We got these new desert boots. There's just a number of different things that they issue to you as you go over there, and it's not issued to soldiers back in the States. It's issued only as a Rapid Fielding Initiative, and that was a really neat plan that they have installed right now. So I just wanted to go in on that.
I can tell you what I saw in a year. And when we first got there and began training Iraqi National Guard, I'm sure that you saw this on the news or heard about them throwing down their weapons and running. That did happen. But by the time that we left, at the end of that year, it was amazing to see the growth that they made. And they were no longer throwing down their weapons and running, and they were were leading from the front, performing the actions, and we would just do what they call the outer cordon so that they could go do the mission. And that was really wonderful to see, and it was a huge step in a year. They're really excited about that too. They want to have control of their country. They are very proudful. They want to be able to do it on their own. So they're happy to have the help right now. They know they can't completely do it by themselves right now, but eventually down the road, yes, they'd like to be able to do it, and I think that one day they will be able to. And these people who are in the Iraqi National Guard, they really, really believe in what they're doing. They have a passion like a lot of Americans don't know. And there's a I'm going to coin the term fast food nation. It's the title of a book. Sometimes I think that we as Americans are just like that. We drive up, we get our lattes, we get our Mickey D's. Everything is fast, you know? It happens like this. And if it doesn't happen like that, then you have a tendency to get angry. Well, it doesn't happen like that in the rest of the world. And just like World War II, it took years for everything to get back on track. It'll be the same thing. War and reconstruction of a country doesn't happen in 72 hours or 38 days or what have you. It sometimes takes years. But I can tell you just from what I saw and experienced, these people really want it. They've just been oppressed for so long and kicked down for so long that they don't always know how to take the initiative to go after what they want and do it, but they're learning.
Thank you. Over the last 4 months, we've heard that all 4 of the branches of the armed forces have failed to meet their recruiting quotas, and from what I've read, the total shortfall is around 8,000 people in the last 4 months. Do you have any opinions about how that might affect National Guards here in Oregon or anywhere else? And what would you feel about reinstating some kind of a draft, if that's possible or necessary?
That takes a lot more knowledge and experience that I have, and I don't really feel tremendously informed on that, but I will say that just my experience was just in terms of talking with a lot of the National Guardsmen in Iraq and just talking to them about, well, you know, was this what you were expecting? And would you sign up again knowing this? And there were a number of people who said no, they wouldn't. And it wasn't, you know, it wasn't necessarily out of not expecting this deployment, although that was also a common theme, but it was just not realizing the toll it would take on their families, on their jobs, on their lives back home. You know, including the 6-month train-up, they've been away for a year and a half. And a lot happens in a year and a half when you have families growing separately, and you have just the strains of everyday life being borne by just the family back home, as well as, you know, someone who's going through an entirely different experience that they don't necessarily want to share all the gruesome details with their family with. And so I think that you're going to find, and they are finding now, that a lot of people are choosing not to, or once their contracts expire, are not choosing to re-sign.
My views on the draft, and they are my personal views, I am against it, very much so. We've worked very hard to build the Army what it is now. Not that draftees would not do that. They've won other wars in the past. What we do have right now is we have some amazing people doing some amazing jobs. It's difficult to get into the Army right now, or any of the services. You have to pass it, you have to receive a certain amount, a certain score on your ASVAB, and different things like that. I also, a volunteer is a very unique person in my eyes. When they believe in something so much that they're willing to go do something like serve their country in the armed forces. You just don't, it's just amazing. I've seen guys just do just amazing things. I do understand there is an issue about guys coming in. Our recruiter, our battalion recruiter, if I'm not mistaken, I want to get the numbers right, but he, out of 114 or somewhere around that, he re-enlisted over 90 of those guys. They re-enlisted in theater, and that's pretty amazing. They also had a $15,000 signing bonus, and if you do it over there, it was tax-free. So I want to make sure that's right, though.
That's right.
Okay. So some of the things that we can focus on, one of my issues is the deployment time. 18 months is a long time. You leave your little 1-year-old baby back home, and you come back and they're pushing 3, and you haven't seen them. And things have changed and all that. But these guys are willing to do that on the same note. But just on my level where I'm at, that's what I see is the length of deployment time. Give the guys what they need, and also, most of all, these guys, quite frankly, I'm very proud of my platoon that I had over there, and any one of them is worth 10 guys off the street. And that's just the way I look at it. They could do anything. And maybe I'm a little cocky about that, but that's how my boys are with me. I'll let Sergeant Bruns take it from there. I forgot the question. The draft.
I don't believe in reinstituting a draft. I just don't. I don't think this is a situation that merits it. I believe that there's a lot of merit to an all-volunteer army. People go in and they do this because it's something they really want to do. And of course, now you have a lot of people who also come also for the college money. But I have to tell you, most of those people who come in for the college money, after they've been there, 6 months to a year, they'll also tell you that it's been a life lesson that they never could have gotten in college. So, and say that it's been well worth it. It's true, he didn't list 90 some odd people out of 114 in theater. It was pretty amazing. Some guys, yes, did it for the money. Some guys did it because of the camaraderie, the people they work with. It was, they really become like family to you. The 1.5-year deployment, like Sergeant Jacques mentioned, is a little long. It's really tough to keep your stamina and your mind in a good place. You could really see a difference when we first got there to by the time that we left, as far as soldiers where they were at. When you first got there, you're hyper vigilant, you're very aware of everything. And as we got closer to leaving to go home, people were having a really hard time paying attention, staying focused. That kind of, you're just you're so tired mentally, emotionally, and physically. So the 1.5 years, for guardsmen it's 1.5 years. For active duty, it ends up being 1 year. And I think statistically, psychologists have said that after 1 year, you're combat ineffective. So these guys really, really, really are pushing themselves, and nothing but cheers for them.
Thank you. This is a question for Helen Jung. We've heard a lot about embedded reporters over the last couple of years. In your experience as an embedded reporter, how does that change traditional war reporting? And do you think it's an effective way to get information from Iraq to back here to the United States?
I think anything that can get reporters closer to the unfiltered experience, firsthand going through things, can only help and produce a lot clearer, more informed coverage of that side. It was a great experience for me in that I just was able to talk to anyone I wanted to. I was able to go out on missions at pretty much as long as there was room in one of the Humvees. And I think that was really helpful in doing what my role was. And my job in going over there was to kind of report on the experience of Oregon Guardsmen in Iraq. In terms of getting a full picture of what's going on, again, you're getting a very in-depth view of one side. Or even just, one of the things that I felt was I was getting an in-the-trenches view, but there's also some downsides to that in that I don't have that higher level view to put things into context or to understand how what soldiers were experiencing on this level connected with what people were experiencing on this level or connected to policy or whatever. And so I think you do need people who are outside that process to help put together a more complete view of what's going on and how it all ties together. But I thought it was a really, I think we got a lot out of it. The Oregonian got a lot out of it. Hopefully, the readers did as well. And I know that just in terms of the feedback I was getting from family members, either through the stories I was writing or on the weblog, it just really helped create a connection between, what was going on in Iraq and people back home in Oregon.
Thank you. Sergeant Bruns, you mentioned to me that there's a fair amount of discussion among women in the military about congressional proposals to limit the jobs that women are doing in combat situations. Can you share with us, how you feel about those proposals and your experience of how some of your colleagues might feel about it?
I better give you a little bit of history background on this first. In 1994, then Secretary of Defense Les Aspin made it a policy that women would be exempt from ground combat units or and co-locating with ground combat units. And I think at that time, a lot of jobs were coming open to women in the military that had never been open before, like field artillery, being able to be on battleships, female fighter pilots, things like this. Of course, Iraq is a completely different war than anybody ever expected. There are no front lines. The initiative that recently came about was brought about by the House Armed Forces Committee, Chairman Representative Hunt from California. And it passed 9-7, and they wanted to put this into effect or add it on to the National Defense Authorization Bill that will come into play in 2006, stating that women cannot be in forward support units or co-locate with combat units. This is already happening. I mean, because there are no front lines, you can't keep people from it. Say, for example, an infantry battalion needs some truck drivers to haul Iraqi National Guard to someplace, or they need them to bring food or water, or they need mechanics or fuel pumpers. It puts you on the road. And the most dangerous place in Iraq most of the time is on the road from the IEDs and small ambush attacks. Most of the females that I've talked to were really angry about this proposal. They were confused about why this was even a subject or an issue, because they've been doing their jobs for so long, and this is something that they trained to do, that they voluntarily went to do, and were performing just as well as the next person. And they didn't feel like their gender should be the prerequisite for their job. Felt more like the prerequisite should be, okay, what are the standards? Can you meet the standards? Well, they do. And if they do, then they should be able to do the job. And they do. They do the job. And so bringing this into play now seemed really old hat. And they couldn't understand why somebody would take them back 20 steps when they'd already been doing this. And it isn't really just new to Iraq. I can tell you from personal experience, when I was in Haiti in 94 and 95, we were co-located. I was the 10th Mountain Division, which is an infantry unit. I was co-located with him. My battle buddy was a male. I slept next to him. We were so tight in the tent that I felt his back on mine every night. It didn't really pose an issue. The novelty of it sort of wears off and you get used to it. So I think that's...
Thank you. Sergeant Jacques, we understand that you were seriously wounded, obviously, when you were in Iraq. With that in mind, how did you keep yourself safe? How can you tell the difference between a civilian and an insurgent in this kind of setting? And how did you and the people you were working with find a way to stay safe?
Well, there's a number of different ways. If you go into a village and a guy looks like me, anybody has blonde hair and blue eyes, he's probably a Chechenian. And it goes down from there. the big thing that I did with my patrol is you go into a village, and I am a father. I have a little boy. If you want to make me mad, be mean to my son. If you want to get to know me, if you were nice to my son, you're probably going to win some points with me. So, beyond all, whenever you walk in somewhere, you just really have to watch what you do and think of it in that way. Always be nice to those little kids. For one, the most important one is one of those kids, and I might have met him over there. He might be going to be the president of Iraq sooner or later, and I want him to have a good impression of Americans. And so you go in there as an ambassador. But at the same note, like our division commander told us, is probably the best thing to keep in mind: polite, professional, and prepared to kill. So you never knew when something was going to happen. Doing that, I can think of twice where kids stopped us in the road before we went into an ambush, and we were able to get out of that. And they jumped in front of us literally crying because they didn't want us to get hurt, because we were the guys that stop and visit with them and be interested in them. And I always like taking pictures and stuff too, but that was kind of interesting. How do you keep yourself safe in day-to-day operations? On the same note with that, you are doing combat patrols. You're searching, you're looking for the bad guys, you're looking for the insurgents. Once you get to know the people, you have to build a rapport with the people in there, because if they tell you who the bad guy is, put it this way, they'll be the last one to die when the insurgent knocks on his door in the middle of the night. That's how it works. So, if you have to build a rapport before anyone's going to say anything to you. On that note, one thing that my patrol, I hit on it all the time, is you have to pay attention to the tactics, techniques, and procedures that the insurgents were using. Everyone knows they're going to set off a secondary explosion or whatever they're going to do after you start your CASEVAC for guys that have been wounded on the initial blast. Sometimes the secondary blast is smaller, sometimes it's a lot larger. It's going to happen. The guys need to know that, and you need to have things installed, or tactics installed to what's going to happen when that second one goes off. What do we do? And I'm not going to go into different things that I did because it might endanger guys that are still doing that over there. I can say I was down, or when we went and did our training, it was sometimes 130 degrees, and my studs would be like, Sergeant Jacques, I'm hot, I'm tired, and you have to push it. You have to rehearse. Rehearsals in every way you can think of what do we do when this happens. And when I was wounded, I was out of the picture. My two squad leaders, I felt totally confident with sending them home on leave. They were home on leave. So I had my two team leaders in charge of the squad. They did an outstanding job. Put it this way, I was in Baghdad 10 minutes after the explosion. So they had the medevac choppers in. They did everything they were supposed to do. And that's just attested to. It kind of goes back on why I'm so proud of my guys. But those are the things that kept us alive. It's just knowing what to do when the time comes, because it's not if the time comes, it was when. And you still have to be nice to people at the same time. So it's really difficult, especially when you lose somebody out of your unit. And it's very difficult. I have to watch myself, and much less my soldiers. But we went out and did it. So.
Can I add something?
Sure.
It was pretty amazing. The American soldiers over there, everyone was so incredibly disciplined, and especially when it came to the heat, when it got up in the July, August, 140, 150 degrees. Iraqis could not believe it, that we had all of that weight on, and we were still able to function and do our jobs. And so kind of the Wild East wise, tales that went around that we found out about is a lot of them believed that our vests we were wearing were air conditioned. They believed that the Gatorade we drank had steroids in it because they just they could not believe it was humanly possible to do the things that our guys did in that kind of heat and just go nonstop. And I think that's a testament to the training that we get as an Oregon National Guard.
Wow. Well, now, in the time we have left, open it to questions from the floor. The microphone is right in front of me. The first question will come from our board host, GWEN MILLIUS, who is a partner with the firm Stevie Royce Millius, an architecture, interiors, and marketing firm. Gwen is the liaison to our new Leaders Council.
First of all, I want to express my deep thanks to Staff Sergeant Bruns and Sergeant First Class Jacques for your service to our country. Coming to talk to a room full of people about your experiences is, I think, above and beyond the call of duty. And I would, if there's anyone that we should be talking to about that, let us know. Thank you very much for being here today. In my following of the Iraq War in the news, I've heard kind of dismaying reports about some communication disconnects between our occupying forces and the Iraqi public. One example that I heard in particular was the use of hand signals at stops where people in cars are being stopped by our military service. And apparently we're using one hand signal that's common in the Army, and there's another hand signal that's prevalent in the Middle East, and our Army hadn't picked it up. And so there was some confusion when people were trying to get through the checkpoint, or they didn't know when to stop. My question is, how much contact, it sounds like you both had a fair amount of contact with the public there in Iraq, and then I wanted to know how well prepared you felt kind of culturally on a social and cultural level to deal with them, how much training you had before you hit the ground on how to talk to these people and what to and not to do. And if you have any recommendations for training of future deployments going to Iraq.
Okay. The training we got at Fort Hood and Fort Polk, it was actually pretty good training. They did show us the hand gestures to make and not to make. There's some that are pretty bad, and there's some that you do need to know. Like if you're driving by and somebody's going like that, it means I'm going to get you later. Okay, as I curse you. There's a whole bunch of different things. Showing the bottom of your left hand is an insult. It's just like showing the bottom of your feet. But the guys seriously had to do it. You don't have a choice. You have to keep one hand on the machine gun and wave with the other hand. So in certain circumstances, that was pretty difficult. I was actually able to learn enough of the language to know, catch a lot of key points that my interpreter would be saying. And it really helped me out. It was just immersion, pretty much, because I'd ask the Iraqi people I got on patrol, I'd say, could you teach me some words today? And they'd show me what the ground meant and all these different things, how to say hi to them and all that. So it worked out good, and sometimes I caught my interpreter, and I'd say, no, I didn't say that. They go, you speak Arabic? And I go, yeah. So kept him on his toes a little bit, so it worked out pretty good. So in that case, all the guys had some outstanding training on those notes.
On all of the traffic stops I was on, I didn't see that happen. I was pretty fortunate, I guess. But to help avoid that happening also, our unit actually got signs, big, huge signs that were written in both English and Arabic, and they would put them out several hundred, yards out before the traffic stop, letting them know that there was going to be a traffic stop up ahead. And you would see the cones, you would see the concertina wire. All of this was put up in advance so to warn the driver that this was coming. As far as training, I wish we got a little bit more of the language, but again, like Sergeant Jacques says, what you didn't get before you went, you definitely got it from immersion. And the Iraqis were really, really eager to teach you, sabah khir, may God shine his light upon you, or what it means to us is good morning. But, and you pick that up really quick too. The kids kids especially are running up to you and grabbing your hand and trying to teach you or tell you and show you just constantly. So what you don't get before you go, you get it real quick once you get there.
Hi, my name is Pete Heuser. I'm a City Club member. First of all, I do want to thank the two of you, the three of you, for your service to the country. We very much appreciate it. It seems to me, and seems to, I think, most people, the most important thing that's going on is the training of the Iraqi troops and police forces. Can you comment generally? I know, Sergeant Bruns, you commented on it briefly, but perhaps you can expand on that as to how that's going. Specifically, perhaps you could address, is there enough enthusiasm among the Iraqis to sign up with all the bombings going on? We hear every day about the bombings at the police station. These are targeted people. Do you see the numbers that are going to be needed as the training continues?
I had one of my soldiers go over there, and I asked him about that quite often. And we dealt with the Iraqi National Guard a number of times. One of the things that you don't always hear about is one of these guys get killed in action. Their culture is way different than ours, and his cousins and his brothers will be at the recruiting pool the next day. They're going to avenge his brother or their cousin. And quite honestly, it's the wrong thing to do to kill one of those guys if you're trying to, kick their morale down, because they won't stop. They keep going. There is definitely a big difference that they were being trained on maintenance of their weapons and things like that go, all go into pride and whatnot. And they had no idea of what, preventative maintenance was or anything like that. So, and these guys were really proud of what they were doing. They'd come up to us, and it was amazing seeing how proud they were, and I was proud of them too. So I hope that answers a little bit.
Yeah, they're amazing people, and I got to tell you, even with the bombings, when we were there, they were getting, bombed at the police stations, at the sites where they'd go to enlist for the Iraqi National Guard and for the police, and still, time after time, whenever they had the recruitment, they would show up in record numbers, far more than what they were taking that day, and with hopes of getting a job with the IP or with ING, and to be honest, it shocked me. Because it would be a deterrent for me, but it wasn't for them. I trust me when I tell you they do want it. They do want it.
One thing I might say about that too is, a lot of the time you aren't fighting the Iraqi people. Yeah. This is a place to kill Americans right now, and most of the guys were Syrian, Saudi Arabian, Wahhabi. Extremists coming out of there, and that's something that needs to be pointed out. Syrian, Jordanian, and Saudi Arabian. And I talked to one guy that his son went down to Saudi Arabia, and he was learning how to be a mechanic. He was really proud of his son, but he told me when he came back, he'd grown his beard out, and he was extreme about everything, and he was worried about his son. He asked me, "What should I do?" And I said, "Make sure he doesn't shoot at me." So, but there is that issue there. There's some really bad people influencing some very impressionable young minds in that sense. So,
that's true. When I was in Fallujah, a lot of the guys that they were picking up and taking out, I remember, I think some of this at the time might have been kept from the media, I'm not sure, but they had a lot of Chechnyans in there that had kind of like gun for hire type deal, had come in, had been training people, Saudi Arabians, Syrians, and your really, really bad guys were the ones that came from outside the country. And the Iraqis that did join them were generally ones that came out of extremely poor areas. They couldn't find jobs. They were just trying to basically get money to put food on the table. And so predominantly the insurgency, a lot of times the news makes so much out about Sunni and Shia, Sunni versus Shia, Shia versus Sunni. I don't think that is near as prevalent as what the media makes that out to be. A lot of times we were over there and we'd see that on CNN and they would be like, what are they talking about? It's not that extreme. Most of the people that are in here are from outside the country.
Hello, Roberta Palmer, City Club member. I heard two Iraqi labor union leaders speak in Portland this week, and their view was that the United States has destroyed their country, they're perpetuating the violence, and they want us to leave now. And also, the private contractors that have come in have brought a lot of foreign workers with them, so that leaves the Iraqis unemployed. How do you square that view with some of your more rosier views of the situation?
I can only tell you, yes, there are some people that feel that way, and when the estates went into Iraq, there's no doubt about it that it drew in a lot of bad guys from other places and tore things apart. But it also gave them a lot of things they didn't have before. And whenever, I'm not a big Bush fan. I know I'm probably not supposed to say that, but I can tell you when the elections were coming up here in America, the Iraqis were very, very, very active in that, constantly asking me, who are you going to vote for, who are you going to vote for? And I would say, well, I'm not sure yet. I'm still trying to decide. And the ones I would speak with predominantly would beg me to vote for Bush. And I would say, why do you want me to vote for Bush? And they would say to me, because if Kerry gets elected, then the Americans are going to go home, and this place is a mess now, and we can't do this by ourselves. So that was the ones that I talked to, that was their biggest fear, was that now that all these people from outside the country had come in, that they wouldn't be able to fight them by themselves.
I'd also say that there's definitely, I think, some debate within the soldiers that I met as well about whether it was good to be in Iraq or not. I think one of the most interesting conversations I had was with 3 sergeants from Bravo Company, and they were each taking kind of this different position regarding whether the U.S.'s presence was becoming a magnet for people to come and for terrorists, for people from other countries to come in and fight or lead the insurgency, whether their presence was turning Iraq into kind of like a terrorism training ground or whatever. And then you have the other point of view where it's like, no, if we leave now, then we're just dooming everyone who's helped or who's worked with Americans to be killed. And then you had someone else who was sort of taking out a slightly middle ground between those two, if there is a middle ground. And I think that is kind of the big question. I mean, I think you could probably make an argument for any one of those stances, and kind of depending on, what's going on at that time, and just, what you look at. But, I would say that there is definitely some debate among soldiers themselves, at least, based on that conversation.
I would like to say one thing on that also. I am completely convinced after being there and doing everything we did, no one's going to be happy, especially when it's this big. But if we were not there, it would be here. I hope everyone, I'm being so honest with you, it would be here. We can sit here and wait, and we can wait for something even worse to happen, which something sooner or later is going to happen again. Or we can take it to them and do it. I am not a warmonger. I have a little boy, I have a wife, and I love him to death. I love my family. I do not want to go to war. But on that same note, when my country's in danger, I have sworn an oath to defend it. And that's where I went. And that's what I'm all about. And that's what all the guys who stand next to me are about. So on that note, that's just the way I feel. That's just the way I feel.
Time to go for 15 more minutes?
Yeah.
We'll go for 15 more minutes. Gone through our normal time, but thanks.
Sherry Fishman, City Club member. This is for you, Helen. And I also want to thank you all for serving. As a reporter, were there some constraints placed on you and on what you could report? And also, did you place any self-constraints on yourself?
That's an interesting question. I don't think that there were constraints on what I could do. There were definitely none on what I could write. But I remember I went with a photographer, Randy Rasmussen, and we were trying to go out with the Scouts platoon for the longest time. They're the ones who do a lot of reconnaissance missions, a lot of, a little dicier missions. And, almost every single time we were told that there were no seats available on the Humvees. And so we were just kind of wondering whether there was whether it was a situation where they were trying to either not let us see something or protect us. And we never really got a good answer to that. We were able to go out with them a few times, but it took a lot of pushing for it. There were certain situations where there was one conflict with the military, and that involved, it was after a Humvee was, after a roadside bomb had gone off and 2 soldiers were killed. And the Army has a 24-hour communications blackout where none of the soldiers can make any phone calls or get on the internet, et cetera, for 24 hours. When we signed up to go over, we agreed to a certain list of conditions that were all spelled out, and abiding by the communications blackout was not one of them. This was the second time that soldiers had been killed while we were there. And in the first instance, they were okay, and they knew that we were going to be making a phone call to our editors to let them know what was going on. We didn't actually file a story. That was all reported out from back here in Portland. Mike Francis did that. But they knew that we were making that phone call to our editors. The second time this happened, we were told that we had to turn over our cell phones and our satellite data connection. And that was a situation where it got to be a little bit confrontational, where we said, okay, we will willingly abide by the communications blackout, even though it's not in our agreement. But, knowing that this is a story that can wait. I think other news organizations might feel differently, but we felt like this was something that we could wait on. But we weren't going to turn over our equipment, because to me that's akin to turning of your notes. Our cell phones have like a record of who we call and who calls us, and that we felt was not the military's business. It sort of got to, it was a little bit tense, but, and I think it was very emotional, because the public affairs officer that I was dealing with was in charge of the regiment from which one of the soldiers who was killed was from. And so I think that was driving a lot of the tension in it. But that was the only situation, and it was a tense situation, but it's the only one where I felt like they were actively trying to stop us or exert certain controls over us.
I'd like to say one thing on that, and that is